Hi, fantasy readers. This is Karyne Norton, your fellow book binger, and you are listening to the Finding Fantasy Reads podcast, where you can test out a new fantasy story every single week to find your next favorite author. Today, you get 4 stories instead of 1, because we're featuring some Havoc flash fiction from Beka Gremikova. Beka writes folkloric fantasy and science fiction from her little nook in the Ottawa Valley, Ontario. Her passions include traveling, folklore and myth, and nerding out over anime, manga, and The Legend of Zelda. When she's not reading, writing, or drawing, she can be found climbing mountains and slaying monsters, in the virtual realm, of course. In real life, she prefers cuddling cute animals and eating delicious foods of all kinds. This first story has a mix of humor and horror, as a young girl goes up against a Gorgon. Please enjoy Perdita Danville, Gorgon Slayer, by Beka Gremikova. Miss Perdita Danville crept along the moonlit heath, trailing the large, fluffy cow that guided her, its rope clenched in her fist. A bag of dead mice dangled from her belt. With a sword buckled at her waist and her pocket mirror safe in her traveling coat pocket, she was more than suitably armed against the monster she sought in the Scottish moorlands. She wished she felt as prepared as she looked. This is insanity. What have you done? What were you thinking? She hadn't been thinking. She'd acted on instinct, on her desire to protect her mother from an odious suitor back home in Oxfordshire. I wish Lord Curdface had never seen her, Perdita muttered, stumbling over a clump of heather. Lord Collins had fallen in love with her mother at first sight, but he was odious and cruel as a Gorgon. Something Perdita hadn't been afraid to tell her mother. Publicly. And perhaps too loudly. Soon after, the man approached Perdita about hunting down the Scottish Gorgon for him, claiming the monster's head would be a grand shield against his many enemies. A fine excuse to send her into danger that would most likely see her turned to stone. But she'd decided to try to take advantage, and she'd struck a deal. If she brought back the monster's head, Lord Collins would drop his suit. If not, well, she'd be dead, and he could continue his pursuit of her mother unopposed. He'd heartily accepted. And now she, idiot extraordinaire, was mucking through cow droppings on her way to almost certain doom. Calm down, Perdita. Laird Andrew gave you advice. Heed it. The deep, soothing voice of her Scottish host played through her mind. Keep your eyes on the cow. It knows when a monster's near. Don't look at the Gorgon directly. Use your mirror. Take the mice for the snakes, so they don't strike you. Heat swept across her cheeks as she recalled his smile and his playful yet earnest plea. And after you slay the Gorgon, perhaps you can help me with the monster in my lock? If he felt so confident that she could succeed, then perhaps she could look something so fearsome in the face and survive. Perhaps. Chills swept along her arms, and she focused on the cow before her to distract herself. Her fingers tightened around the rope. The cow stopped, tossing its head, its eyes flaring wide and white, its tail drooping. The poor beast was terrified. Then, so quickly Perdita couldn't react, the creature bolted. The rope tore from her fingers as the creature bounded away down the hillside. Heart thumping, she clambered to the spot the cow had stood and gazed down the opposite side of the heath. Stretched across the grass in the vale lay the Gorgon, her snakes curled up asleep around her head. Slim, scaled fingers and toes ended in claws that shone in the moonlight. Her round, cherub-like face was tilted to the sky. Her eyes were closed. She can't see you. You're all right. That single detail assuaged Perdita enough that she forced her feet to move down the hillside. Just as she reached the bottom, she stumbled over an uneven patch of heath. She cursed. A snake stirred, raising its head, its tongue flicking. She fumbled in her pocket for her mirror, angling her body away from the Gorgon. If the monster's eyes popped open and their gazes met? Breaths coming in shallow gasps. Perdita's eyes locked on the snake in her mirror. She stood frozen. Her thoughts scrambled. Calm down. Think. What do you have? Sword. Mirror. Mice. Mice. Slowly, she dipped her hand into the bag at her waist. Stomach heaving, she withdrew a cold, furry corpse. Inching as closely as she dared, she wriggled the mouse until the snake snatched it from her fingers and recoiled, fangs digging into its meal. Distracted. For now. Time to strike. She heaved the sword in one hand, rechecked her mirror, and found a horde of tongue-flicking faces. She gasped. A chorus of indignant hisses slithered into the night. The Gorgon groaned, her eyes blinking open. In Perdita's mirror, her gaze blazed brighter than the noonday sun. The snakes writhed, striking at one another as they fought over the mouse. Not how she'd hoped this would go, but she couldn't back down. Perdita raised her sword. "Quick to kill, aren't you, girl?" The voice crawled through her mind, and Perdita froze. What do you mean?" "You think you're a hero, but to kill me is to play into a cruel man's hands." Perdita swallowed. "And then you'll be no better than him. A murderer, a slayer of innocence." Her pulse pounded, and she felt her sword slipping from her hand. What if the creature was right, and to kill her was to turn into Lord Curdface herself? Laird Andrew hadn't prepared her for this. "Look at me, child, and ask yourself if you can truly do such a horrendous deed." She nearly raised her eyes, and stiffened as horror slid through her. Of course. The monster had used its mind-reading abilities to try to get her to look up and die. This wasn't the famed Medusa, wronged and shamed. This creature was a younger monster that laughed at the expression on her face. Her grip tightened on her sword. This time, she didn't let herself hesitate. She lunged. The blade flickered in the corner of her eye, first with speed, then with spattering blood. The creature shrieked, and Perdita staggered away from the sprawling body to fall on her hands and knees, head buzzing. The grass beneath her shimmered in the moonlight, oddly ethereal. When she dared turn around, the Gorgon's head lay at her feet. She'd done it. She sprawled across the moor, giggling. Her dress was ruined. Her hair was a mess. And she'd survived. She was a Gorgon Slayer. Gorgon Slayer. She'd have to add that to her calling card. I hope you enjoyed listening to Perdita Danville, Gorgon Slayer, by Beka Gremikova, narrated by Karyne Norton. You're going to notice a bit of a trend with all of these stories touching on darker sides of fantasy, but while the last one held more humor, this next one carries loss and grief mixed with threads of hope. Please enjoy Viper's Den by Beka Gremikova. I'm sunning myself on a rock when I hear the shuffle of human feet rubbing against dirt. I swivel my head, and my tongue flickers in and out, detecting sweat, cinnamon, and the heady tang of the flowering bidya that Mamua planted just for me by the front of her hut. The ground rumbles with movement, sending vibrations along my scales. Deep voices mutter to one another. Men. The unfamiliar intonations crawl across my scales like bugs. Nor youths creeping into the mangroves to hunt. These men are strangers. The poison glands in the back of my mouth swell. The last time a strange man found me, back when I did not fear to embrace my human shape. A strangled hiss escapes me. At least as a snake, I thought I'd be safe from the reaching, clawing fingers of men. But will I ever truly feel safe again? Perhaps they're simply here to visit the elders. Perhaps they carry no ill intent. Don't jump to such evil conclusions. That's what Mamua's friends would insist. The footsteps echo closer, bouncing off the mud brick wall of Mamua's hut. The sounds break me from my terrified stupor. I abandon my rock, flattening myself against the ground. A pair of long, cold shadows block the sun, followed by a man's deep, jubilant voice. "Yurakin Viper," he whispers, snatching the sack that dangles from his belt. "She'll get lots of Tulus on the market." Those words pin me to the spot. Venom poachers. The second man edges forward, gripping a long stick with a leather strap tied around its end like a noose. Part of me wants to shift back to human, to scream for Mamua. But she's far off at the river with the other women washing clothes. She's tried so often to convince me to come along, but I detest her friends' pitying stares. I know they ponder whether I'll ever shift back to human shape or stay a snake forever. I'd much rather stay home with the Bidya for company. The men inch forward. I rise into strike position, fangs bared. My tail rattles like a mountain about to crumble. The man with the stick pauses, his gaze never straying from me. His fingers tighten around his weapon. Slowly, he moves the stick closer, and its strap looms. I lunge, hissing, my jaw loose and dropping, my fangs dripping poison. The man curses and stumbles backward. "Hurry up! Catch her!" The deep-voiced man approaches, the sack slung between his hands. "Before the villagers hear!" The words hit me like a viper's strike. Before the villagers hear. The Bidya. The wailing weeds, first planted by the serpent spirit after a mortal man accosted her, may be my best chance. Even if I bite one of the men, the other might snatch me. The poachers block my path. I dart forward with a false strike, and the men yelp, jumping aside. The stick man swears and lurches toward me. I throw myself sideways, avoiding the loop which brushes past my head. Before me, the Bidya beckons. I race toward its clump of thorny blooms, hoping these strangers won't recognize the flowers. I glide between the stems and huddle under the fierce crimson petals. Cursing, the men stomp after me. Their forms waver in my snake sight and stop in front of the Bidya. "Can you reach her?" the deep-voiced man asks. "I'll try." But the bush is so large that the man can't stretch toward me without brushing the petals. The entire plant stiffens, and the petals snarl. Each individual flower on the bush lets out a collective hiss before uttering a piercing screech. The welcome alarm pierces my head. Mamua, everyone, must have heard it on the banks of the river. The man staggers backward and tumbles to the dirt. The other poacher stands frozen, his eyes wide. A shout rises in the distance. The poachers startle, glance at one another, turn to run. But now more footsteps tear up the earth. A frenzy of deep, familiar voices clutter the village square. The familiar tones of banana farmers and hunters, alerted by the Bidya. Tongue flicking the air, I poke my head out between leaves. So many warm shapes cluster together. The villagers surround the men, break their stick, shout at them. The voices blur in my ears, but they're heavy with rage. The villagers bind the men with ropes and drag them away. I sit in the cool dark until another set of footsteps ripples along the ground. The light tread darts over rocks and sticks. Mamua's bright shape flashes into being before the bush. Her wrap dress tangles around her legs, and her laundry basket is nowhere in sight. She swipes at her sweaty black hair. Kokula? She cries. My human name. My heart wrenches with the yearning to shift, to hug her with human arms. But I'm not ready to feel so soft and unsafe. Not yet. I inch out from under the flowers. Clutching her chest, Mamua gives a deep sob, drops to her knees, and holds out a hand. I slither up her arm to nestle against her neck. Her tears drip onto my scales. I heard the pidya, she whispers, voice choked. My tongue flicks 3 times against her skin in our secret code. Unharmed. I'm so sorry, dear one. Her body trembles, and her deep mountain accent thickens. I wish I could be here more. I wish I could protect you from everything. I coil around her shoulders, my tongue brushing her cheek again. You do protect me. Perhaps not from everything. After all, Mamua cannot always be here, but she has provided me with a refuge in the Bidya. And she loves me, whether I be snake or girl. It's enough to make me hope that one day I may feel truly safe once more. I hope you enjoyed listening to Viper's Den by Beka Gremikova, narrated by Karyne Norton. This 3rd story addresses grief once more, but it returns to a bit of the humor and adds in some mystery. Please enjoy Magpie Boy by Beka Gremikova. Go see a show, Lindsay. Get out of the house for one evening. My neighbors like to give advice, some of it better than others. How can I see a musical without Amalia? That's like betraying her memory. My fingers clench around Tico's leash, and he looks up from sniffing a sunshine-colored fire hydrant, whining. Ahead, the community theater's cheery yellow bricks blaze like a torch. Posters for their upcoming show plaster the walls. Crinkled golden leaves flutter against the rain-soaked pavement. I'm not going in. I'm just walking by. A bicycle bell echoes across the street, shooting shivers down my spine. Magpie Boy. He rides up next to me, knobby-kneed with a thin, wasted face. Hey there, lady. He stands on the pedals, leaning over to look me in the eyes. I shrink back. Hi. Maybe one-word answers will discourage him. Want to see what I found? Magpie Boy nods to the basket, stuffed with trash from the street and dangling from the handlebars. He picks at his frayed yellow shirt and doesn't even shiver when the autumn wind blasts us. My neighbors warned me about Magpie Boy. Say yes when he asks you to look at his collection. Yes. I fiddle with my lemon-patterned scarf as he rummages in the basket. Tico paws at a patch of grass, but I tug him toward the theater. Maybe the ticket seller's presence will discourage Magpie Boy from talking to me. Look! Magpie Boy raises his hand. My stomach drops. He holds a dead goldfinch, its wings curved into its stiff body. I think of myself, curled up all those nights on my bed, as still as this tiny creature, dead inside. Magpie Boy studies the bird with his lips pursed, before tossing it back in the basket. I collect things. Do you collect things? He asks with the casual brazenness of a child who fears nothing. Say yes when he asks if you collect things. Yes, I whisper. It's not a lie. I stuff my hands in my coat pockets, fingers tangling in balls of lint, car keys, candy wrappers, and unused tissues. A tiny yellow chew toy that Tico adores, even though I hate its squeak. Do you like gifts? Magpie Boy grins at me and offers 2 pieces of thin, yellowed cardboard. And if he offers you something, take it. He holds 2 Broadway tickets, stamped for an evening show of Wicked. My mouth goes dry. Amalia's last musical. Our last happy memory before months of puke-yellow hospital halls, flashing lights on monitors, and finally, the doctor bowing his head as he murmurs, "She's gone. I'm so sorry." I burned those tickets 2 years ago, hoping the pain would burn away with them. I guess even objects can become ghosts. He holds them out to me expectantly. "Take them," my mind screams. "Don't upset the neighborhood ghost." But what if I touch those ghostly cards and the grief revives, fresh and ferocious, shutting down my body, shriveling my soul until it's as withered as the yellow leaves on the pavement? I can't move. Magpie Boy stops pedaling, and the tickets vanish from his hand. "You don't like my gift?" he asks in a high, crackling voice, close to a screech. My ears ring. Tico snarls, his golden fur bristling along his ruff. My fingers lock around his leash. "I didn't mean to offend you." My neighbor's warning flashes through my mind. "And if you anger him, he'll take your joy for himself." He grins at me. "It's okay. I won't be upset if you give me something. Happy memories are my favorite." My brain feels like it's being sucked with a vacuum. Memories rising to the surface and melting outward through the walls of my skin. Bright autumn days. Cozy evenings snuggled with Tico on the couch under a warm blanket. The ring of the telephone as a friend checks in. Magpie Boy hums to himself, smiling widely. He's stealing the few joys I have left, joys that soften the long nights of grief and loneliness. Amalia singing along to musical soundtracks as we do dishes after dinner. No, he can't have those. I'll give Magpie Boy something to collect, but it won't be my happiness. "Stop!" I yank my crumpled scarf over my head. "I'll give you something else." He stares at me. "Something else?" Shaking, I hand him the scarf. "Someone I love gave me this. I want you to add it to your treasures." Eyes wide, he runs his fingers along the soft material. "No one's ever given me anything." He wraps it around his neck. When the wind blasts us again, he shivers with me and laughs. Like it's fun to pretend he's actually alive. Like it's funny that someone cared enough about him to give rather than take. "Would you like some more?" I empty my pockets, tossing candy wrappers, tissues, everything I can find into his hands. He cradles it all tenderly, singing to himself. Tico stops growling, ears tipped forward at the boy's soft, sweet tone. Magpie Boy would appreciate a musical. I start walking again, and he places his things in his basket and pedals alongside me until we reach the community theater. They're performing The Wizard of Oz tonight. It's not Broadway. I can't quite deal with that yet. But I think I'm ready for some baby steps. And maybe Magpie Boy will want a ticket of his own. "Want to see a show?" I point to a poster depicting a red-ribboned Dorothy chatting gaily with a scarecrow, a lion, and a tin man, while Toto dances around their heels. Magpie Boy stares slack-jawed at the poster. "I've never been to a musical." It's never too late to start. I purchase 2 tickets for the evening show. He sets his ticket right on top of his basket, the place of honor. Tonight, I may attend a show with a ghost by my side, but I'm no longer haunted. I hope you enjoyed listening to Magpie Boy by Beka Gremikova. This last one is probably my favorite because it's a mermaid story with an eerie, melancholy feel. Please enjoy The Mercy of the Currents by Beka Gremikova. Diving for corpses was not Bellion's ideal profession, but someone had to do it. She shivered as cold, merciless currents swept past, dragging snarls of seaweed and chipped clamshells along with them. Before her, two gleaming shapes curled through the water, light glowing from their sleek bodies. The presence of Ursu and Laur, her glowing dragons, helped keep her sane during these missions at least. Drawing even with them, she ran her fingers across their smooth scales. The dragons let out high, echoing clicks, and one turned to nuzzle her. Their large, agile forms cut through the buffeting currents, carrying her toward their quarry. Jutting like a rock from the sandy seafloor sat a ship. Its mast snapped, its sails torn and dangling. Ursu's frilled crest flared, and she surged forward. Bellion clung to Laur as another current blasted her, letting him pull her closer to the ruined boat and the dark potential within. "Please find my brother." Ki Gari, Prince of Tangwar, had hired her to search for his younger brother in the wreckage. In return, he'd look for her sister, Linyi, who'd left the ocean and disappeared on land 3 months ago. Bellion had heard rumors of Ki Gari's wild, siren-charming brother, master of a coastal palace that housed many parties. Still, she hoped, for Ki Gari's sake, that she would find no trace of the prince, that he would end up alive somewhere, sleeping off a wild night. As they drew near, Laur let out a distressed hiss. Bellion rubbed his head, trying to soothe his nerves. Unlike Ursu, who seemed to enjoy sniffing out corpses, Laur reflected Bellion's own mood. She pressed her cheek against his neck. "It's all right, boy," she murmured. The ship, a Tangwarian pleasure boat, had been embraced by clinging algae. Colorful fish flitted about the shadows, while vibrant sea flowers fluttered in the currents. It looked like the kind of place Linyi would have turned into a garden. Linyi, with her blue-streaked black hair, wide, smiling lips, and glittering dark eyes. A mirror of Bellion herself. Bellion's fingers clenched. Why did Linyi have to leave? She'd asked herself that question so many times. Linyi had confessed to Bellion that she'd fallen in love with a man while rescuing him during the first storm of the season. But leaving her entire family to turn human? As if being a mermaid and Bellion's twin sister hadn't been good enough. Anger set Bellion's scales to sparking, and Laur shied. Bellion patted his head again and shook herself. She needed to control her emotions and get this job done. Drifting away from Laur, she followed Ursu, who already skimmed the deck toward the cabin hall. At the doorway, Bellion hesitated, gut clenching as she peered into the narrow, twisting hallway. Laur gently nudged her back. "You can do this." She plunged after Ursu, Laur at her tail. The hallways curved, cavernous and dark. Though Bellion's eyes adjusted, her mind couldn't adapt to the tight space. Why would Linyi leave open ocean to cram herself into human boats and houses? Bellion's limbs shivered with sudden panic. Ahead stood a door. She grabbed the handle, thankful it hadn't rusted closed, and burst into a large, grotto-like room. The tension in her limbs eased, her mind clearing. Her gaze caught on a crab scuttling across the floor, its pincers waving. She traced its path to... She froze. Fins shriveling, scales sparking in horror. 10 bodies lay scattered across the chamber, bloated and waterlogged. Fish nibbled at their fine pants and decorative wraps. Her fingers curled against Laur's side as Ursu slithered into the chamber behind them. Slowly, the initial shock faded. Bellion crept deeper into the chamber. With her dragon's help, she could bring resolution to many Tangorian families affected by this shipwreck, and perhaps find resolution for her own family, if Ki-Garyi had managed to find Linyi and convince her to return home. Bellion approached the first body. Lar, Ursu, Kitur. The dragons surrounded the corpse, pressing their scales against the nobleman. Their Kitur, the specialized magic found in each sea creature, pulsed through their bodies, seeping into the dead man. As Bellion watched, his bloated features transformed, restored to how he'd looked in life. Smooth, dark skin, bright eyes, thick black curls. Her heart sank. She recognized those features. Ki-Garyi had been right. This was his brother's ship. Her tail curled. Hopefully, Ki-Garyi wouldn't retaliate against a bearer of bad news. She moved to the next corpse, a woman swathed in a once fine crimson wrap. While Ursu kept Ki-Garyi's brother wrapped in her couture, Laur dragged his scales along the woman's limbs. Once again, the magic thrummed, restoring, revealing. Long black hair glinting with blue streaks, large, glittering dark eyes, a wide, full mouth. Bellion's fins shriveled. Her head spun, and the chamber seemed to close in like a mass of sharks. Only Laur's snout, suddenly pressed against her forehead, kept her steady. She buried her fingers in his frilled mane, unable to speak. Linyi. Oh, Linyi. She stared at the feet poking out from her sister's dress. Was turning human worth dying as one? Her stomach twisted, and she gritted her teeth. Was it worth abandoning your family? Leaving us for some... Ursu prodded Bellion gently. Bellion blinked, drawn back into the moment. Both her dragons watched her, awaiting her next command. She sucked in a breath. She couldn't do any more for Linyi, couldn't change the currents of her choices. But above, a young man still yearned for resolution, for an ending to his quest. No matter what that ending might be. She smoothed down her scales. She would return to gather the other bodies and bury her sister in the quiet gloom, while her glowing dragons sang mourning songs over the grave. For now, Bellion would offer Ki-Garyi what comfort she could. Together, with Ursu and Laur, she left the shimmering shipwreck to the mercy of the currents. I hope you enjoyed listening to The Mercy of the Currents by Beka Gremikova. If you want to read more by Beka, go to bekagremikova.com to find more of her books. Her next book, The Edge of a Knife and Other Stories, will be releasing at the end of the month. It's for fans of dark fantasy and science fiction, with a healthy balance between tragedy and hope, and a side helping of sweet, swoony romance. I'll have the pre-order link in the show notes. We're currently booking for February and beyond, which is hard to believe because it feels like we just started Season 3. So if you have a short story you'd like to hear featured on the podcast, whether it's your own or someone else's, you can go to findingfantasyreads.com/contact to find the application form for authors or to recommend a story as a reader on our contact form. And don't forget about this month's giveaway, where you can win 4 audiobooks and a 3-month Audible subscription. You can enter at findingfantasyreads.com/giveaway. Thank you all for listening, and happy reading.